Welcome to day 1 of the Heal Yourself Challenge. Today we're going to discover how to connect with and hear the voice of your soul. Now, a lot of times when people start thinking about their soul, they think about soul purpose. And in essence, what we are really wanting is to receive guidance from our soul. And when we wonder what our soul purpose is, that's because we cannot hear that guidance. So that means that there's static or there's some barriers to receiving our soul energy or receiving that information from our soul. Because when we ask a question, when we wonder something, we should be able to receive the answer. We should be able to have a sense of the correctness of something for us. I'm going to use the metaphor of the sun to help explain the concept of how I understand this communication or this connection with our soul energy. So as you know, the sun is always available to us. The sun is always present. It's always shining. So it's always emanating that heat and that light. Now, sometimes we can't see it, and sometimes it's brighter than other times, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. So now, why can't we see it? Well, sometimes we can't see it because there's something in front of it. So like with the moon, and there is an eclipse. So we can think of, we can't see it because the moon is eclipsing the sun. So we know the energy is there, we know the sun is there, but we can't see it. Another reason why we can't see it is because we're turned away from it. So when we're turned away from it, it's nighttime and we can't see the sun, but we know it's there. Other times it could be atmospheric conditions, or it could be weather. So there's clouds, or perhaps there's smoke in the air. And so we can't see the sun, but we know that it's there. So sometimes we can't see it, but we can feel it. So we can feel the heat, even though we can't see the light. So you want to think of your soul in exactly the same way. So your soul is always present. It's always there. It's always part of you. So you are never not your soul. So your soul energy is always there. Now, whether you can feel it consciously, or you can sense it consciously, or you can sense the direction from your soul consciously is another issue. And so it could be because there's this eclipsing. There's this something that is in the way of you being able to connect or to communicate or to feel that connection, because the connection is always there. But sometimes we don't feel the connection, or we can't sense the connection. So our soul energy is always there. It's always available to us. It's a matter of whether we can access that energy. Now, the energy of your soul carries the energy of your soul purpose, which is why you can't access what your soul purpose is, or you're confused, or you're unclear. So one key understanding is that our soul is always present and we are always connected to it. Now, whether we can discern that connection or not, or whether we can receive those messages or not, is another issue. And so we're gonna call that soul eclipsing. That's when we can't access it. It's still there, but we are having trouble accessing. So that's important to understand about the soul. Now, the other thing is that our soul is unique and our soul is original to us. So that soul energy is something that only we have access to. It's not anything that's repeated or duplicated in anyone else. Now, most of us are disconnected from this energy in one way or another, and some of us are more disconnected. Now, it is very painful for us to be disconnected from this energy. I'm sure that you have heard, especially in people who are kind of undergoing a spiritual awakening process, is that they start thinking, it was so much easier when I wasn't on this journey, on the spiritual awakening journey. In fact, it's better, can I just go back to sleep? so that I don't feel this pain. I don't feel this discomfort. I don't feel this disconnection. So why is it more painful? Why is it more of an issue for people who are on a spiritual journey or who are on this awakening path? Well, the reason is because we want to establish that connection. We know that connection is there, or we're not fully accessing that flow of information and that flow of energy from our soul. And that's what makes it so painful. Somebody who is not in a spiritual awakening path, that may be the case for them, but they're not really aware of it. So it's not as painful. Once we become aware of it, then it becomes very painful and sometimes intolerable for us to feel that disconnection. So when we are connected with our soul energy, we don't ever think, oh, I wish I could go back to sleep. No, what we want is we want to establish a deeper, more fluid communication with that energy so that it flows without impediment into our bodies and into our consciousness and into all of our energy bodies so that we can live being guided by our soul energies. Sometimes people turn to meditation in order to connect with that oneness, in order to feel that connection with their soul energy. And it feels really good. And they come out of meditations saying, like, I didn't want to come out of it because it felt so good. I was really enjoying. There was joy and there was oneness. Well, that's all fine and good. However, we want to be experiencing that in our daily lives all the time. We don't want to have to escape into meditation in order to feel that connection. We want to feel that connection every day. This unique soul energy is what I like to call soul essence. Now, the reason why I want to call it soul essence, for example, instead of soul purpose, is because people tend to think of soul purpose in a very contained way. They tend to think of it like it's this way. There's this one right way to do it. And sometimes they start conflating it with a job, with a thing that they are here to do on earth, versus soul essence is about connecting with that energy so that you can be more creative, so that you have choices, so that you have opportunities as to how to express it, because it's not supposed to be expressed in one way. So again, the issue with soul essence most of the time, and the reason why people cannot connect to it, is because it's being eclipsed in one way. One of the major reasons why it gets eclipsed is because we are, in fact, educated out of our connection with our soul essence. And this is because of the messages that we hear from our parents, from the messages that we hear when we are in school, the messages that we hear from our community, all about the correct way of being, how we should be, the way that we should be, what it takes to be successful, what are the different ways and methods and structures and so on. And then we trust our parents, we trust our teachers, and we think, well, they know better, then we start following them. But what happens is that then we stop listening to the nudges, we stop listening to the messages, and then when we've done it so long, then we can no longer hear. So for today, our activity is, I want you to think about those messages that you have heard all your life that just didn't quite sit right with you. They didn't quite ring true. So this could be, for example, messages like, be a good girl, don't talk too much. Or be a good girl, take care of other people. Or be a good girl, don't raise your hand to ask questions. Or perhaps money doesn't grow on trees. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of one particular statement, one thing that you have heard from a lot of different places and a lot of different directions and a lot of different people, a lot of different situations that just didn't quite ring true. And I want you to journal about that, because the very first step in being able to listen to our soul is knowing what isn't our soul. So and how do we discern that? Well, by looking at a message that quite isn't sitting right with us. It's just not ringing true. And so that is the very first step. And that's what I want you to start with today. And go ahead and take this to your workbook so you can identify a belief or identify a message that you've heard all your life that didn't quite sit right. And then tomorrow, we're going to work with that one belief. What I want you to take away from today is that the very first step to be able to understand or connect with your soul is to start paying attention to what's not your soul. Because behind that is this your soul communicating with you. So that little nudge that something isn't quite right, that little nudge that something's not sitting well with you, that's your soul wanting to come through. So a lot of times that's the easiest way to start this connection process is through examining those things that we have been told over and over that just don't seem right. So thank you for being here for day 1. So take that to your workbook and come to the group and share what you have been thinking about. And we'll see you tomorrow for day 2.